Okay, guys, thank you. We move to the next panel. Without further ado, non-human identities. I'll welcome Oz and his speakers to the stage.
So first and foremost, thanks everybody for joining us such early in the morning in such hectic days. I want to first and foremost thank Moshe Ferber that is doing so much for the community and has been able really to take this chapter to new heights. I think that we're doing more and more each and every year, and we're really seeing the fruits of it. So thanks a lot and keep up. I wanted to start by reading something that me and ChatGPT wrote together. So securing non-human identities has become a crucial task in nowadays tech landscape. As all organizations are becoming more technological and the attack surface is broadening and incorporate more applications and more technologies. More of what we call now non-human identities are introduced to various technologies. I don't know even if my microphone here is already counts as a non-human identity already, one of the questions that we are going to speak about. And NHIs are now outweighing humans by a factor of 50. So how did we get to this point? And leaving aside what ChatGPT wrote, I think after Ofer's session, and thank you for that, Ofer, for giving this introduction with so many different attacks, this is very complex. I think this maybe term, non-human identities, is kind of new, but it also introduces different problems that we have in the past. So why is this term now is just all over the industry, and how did we get to this confusion? And maybe Jackson, you are one of the pioneers of the field. I think we spoke of non-human identities 3 years ago, maybe in different contexts. Maybe we didn't have the term, but you saw the evolution. So how did we get into this place?
Yes, thank you. Working 1, 2, check, check. Morning, everyone. Yeah, I think we all heard about a bunch of attacks, obviously, that all originate. And just like Ofer here, my friend from Mitiga shared, 50% of them, the truth is some statistics talk about 80% of them come from identity and access management as an initial access of that attack vector. And then, like you just shared, right, usually we have more machines than humans. Factor of 50 times, even 10 times is an order of magnitude more. And obviously, you know, we're managing users in some aspects, single sign-on, 2FA, whatever. We've got Okta. It's never perfect, right? We've got our grasp on users in like 70%, 80%, but obviously we have nothing for the bigger part of access, right, which are all these machines, and obviously with the trend of AIs, and that's obviously a big blind spot. So it's not just natural that attackers are kind of leaning into that.
Yeah. I think that, Shahar, you know, we go way back. Even, I think 3, 4 years ago, we were already handling things around application security, around secrets management, SSH keys, API. We have a whole vertical of API security. How does that intersect with everything around non-human identities? Because this is quite a new term, and we have all these issues before that are now incorporated to non-human identities.
Yeah, good morning, first of all. Like a bunch of Israelis, maybe we should introduce ourselves first and then do the panel.
That's true.
So let's do a very quick introduction, and then I will answer your amazing question. So I'll start. Okay, so I'm Shahar Maor, CISO at FullPath, and that's it.
Tzach Horowitz, CEO of CyProtect. We provide vCISO services mostly to startups.
Hello, Jackson. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Astrix Security. We started with non-human identity around 3 years ago before it was such a big buzz.
I have my own microphone. My name is Brit Glazer. Very excited to be here today. I'm the head of information security at the coolest startup ever. I'm not biased, called Unit Finance.
And I'm Oz. Sorry for not introducing everyone. I'm used to be on the stage and I'm used to see the people. already. I'm a founder of a startup in the space of preparation and management of crisis, of cyber crises. If you want to know more, speak to me later. But back to the question. So Shahar, where is this intersection between AppSec, secrets management, and all these things with the field of NHI?
No, I think that today's environment is very complicated. There's no such thing as single systems anymore. Even if you do a new integration with a new vendor, most likely it will have to be integrated with other systems in order to produce real value. So I think that the fact that we're not talking about islands anymore, but we're talking about a full ecosystem, regardless whether it's a monolith that we provide or a lot of other integrations with other systems. It means that it takes a lot of resources, a lot of skill sets from different expertise in order to understand, map it, and properly prioritize it and mitigate risks, obviously. And secret, and I think Ofer provided a great introduction to our session actually by providing so many examples of what's actually going on out there. And we see it every day on our work, and we see how much it is difficult to mitigate relatively what we thought would things that should be relatively simple to mitigate, but we see it becoming more and more complicated just because it's not isolated anymore. So DevSecOps, application security, everyone needs to be in some cases in a war room just to figure out how we're going to tackle a situation that used to be very simple in the past.
Yeah. Indeed, and I think what really Ofer highlighted in the presentation that there are different attack surfaces and different attack vectors. And we already had before a bunch of different solutions in the market that are maybe related to what we're seeing now, right? We had, or we already have, ITDR, PAM, CIEM. We have application security platform and supply chain platforms. And now we have this whole new emerging space of NHIs. And we spoke about it before, Brit, when we were preparing, and you had lots to think about it. So where do you see this all industry intersects, and where does it go?
My microphone works well, right? I think that there are many buzzwords around this whole area. And I think for any organization, a first good step will be to understand exactly what is your main problem and where it lies in order to understand what exactly you need in order to handle this issue. And there are a lot of tools in this space. There's overlapping between these tools. And they can be used in different ways. So it really depends exactly what you need to defend from and in order to know what you need to implement. In your space, you can start by, secret scanning to understand where your main issues are and continue from there.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your angle, Jackson. I bet that you have a specific one, but you have been investing and working in order to build a solution that really consolidates all the different maybe vectors and objects that we need to have visibility on, detect issues that related. So what do you think? Is there really a requirement for an actual platform that does everything, and why? Because we already have a lot of organizations that have tools integrated. We actually see that the market is going for optimization, for less tools, for more consolidated platforms. How do you see it?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and it's not a question about NHI, really. It's a question about any cyber security trend that come and goes in waves of between 3 to 5 or maybe even 10 years, right? There's always a big wave of innovation, a new buzzword no one heard about before, right? It was DSPM before that, it was a CNAP before that. These letters kind of confuse us. And you can think of this conference, the amount of cybersecurity conferences, I think correlates with the amount of acronyms that we have. And it all happens because this industry is so interesting. We always have innovation, right? The attackers are always one step above. Technology always keeps changing, right? So what we really need is a bunch of good people to focus on the latest and greatest, right? The hardest problem to solve. And obviously it's hard. It's hard for the big behemoths like Microsoft. If you go to CyberArk, or talking more like identity, if you look at SailPoint, SharePoint, right, and Okta, it's just hard for them to move the obligations, right, the customer base, the big, debt that they have into the latest and greatest, and now trying to solve NHIs, even just conceptualizing, right, how can we fundamentally solve these kind of problems? So it's kind of natural in cybersecurity that you start somewhere, you grow into a big platform, and then you always need the new blood of innovation. Again, it's waves of everywhere between 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the answers, guys. I'd like to maybe take a more practical angle on what organizations can do now when they are investing this whole field in the organization of NHIs. Tzach, you had the privilege during the years to work with different organizations in different sizes. We now see the incorporation of a new portion to cybersecurity programs of NHIs. Do you think that this is a requirement to have? And if it does, what are the principles that you see that you need to incorporate in such a program?
So I would say that I see the intersection between human and non-human identities, because in many cases you would see a SaaS application being accessed by people, by employees, by contractors, by customers, by regulators, and behind the scenes it's very opaque, but there are non-human entities providing the information by using non-human identities to access your data stores. And each one of these identities may be defined, configured, managed, tracked appropriately, but if you don't follow the flow of information, you may lose a lot of the insights that can actually lead to incidents. And we've seen in many cases incidents where each one of these controls worked perfectly on its own, but when you combine them together, you get vulnerabilities that can allow an attacker to get information it shouldn't.
So you think it's a manner of optimization also of existing tools in order to get the insights? And beyond that, what you should really, in principle, incorporate in the program if you're taking on this step?
Yeah, and the key here is that you can manage security without any tools, but it's much more difficult. The better automated, the better ways to rotate keys, to detect changes, to detect access, have to be connected to the threats and to the vulnerabilities you're looking for. And that is why each time a new tool comes in, people say, well, we can do it another way. But every new attack, every new attack vectors, like Ofer said in his presentation, you find that there's a path of least resistance that the attackers follow, and we should too as practitioners.
Thanks for that. Shahar, maybe we can get your point of view. Where should we can actually begin? You were working in a lot of SaaS-oriented organizations, lots of developers. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing anymore.
Depends.
But where you should really start off?
That's a good question. I just want to go back to Tzachi's point about the program. The need for an NHI program per se, I doubt it, at least in my case, that we need a dedicated program for NHI. For me, it's just part of a bigger need that based on risks and what we are trying to achieve. And in the end, that's part of access control and about hygiene of the environment. So I truly believe that in some cases, I agree that, let's say that there was a major breach in the industry, and now the CEO is very scared that it's going to impact our organization, and now he gathers everybody up and says, okay, we need to do something about these secrets that you've mentioned, go fetch them all over the system. Now we have an NHI program if you want it or not. But if you act based on risks, this is what we do, as CISOs, most likely, we work based on risks. So this is part of a larger access control probably program, and it's also part of all the major regulations and all the major requirements. Go back to your question, what was it? Because it was a long time ago.
What are the first things that you would do if you start off now with such a, you're saying that there shouldn't be such a program, but taking the step in order to maybe work on the different paths in order to clarify what NHIs you have, gain detection, gain visibility, etc.
Okay, so starting in a new organization, this is by the way, what I'm doing these days. I'm fetching and doing my first steps in a new organization. It can happen every once in a while. So what you see on the first day, it's a mess. You feel like a huge labyrinth of ununderstandable flows and systems, and you need to find your way. And like everything else, we start from the basics. We map all the assets. We try to map the business flows. We do a lot of interviews with key people to understand what's going on in the organization, and then slowly and gradually drill down to understand and try to put in buckets. And I strongly agree that NHI is a bucket, that we need to start and classify our issues and how we should tackle them. And the next step would be probably to prioritize. How would you prioritize? That's up to you. There are frameworks that you can align to. There are other instincts, maybe. In many cases, you'll probably do it in the right way. There's an issue of budget. In some cases, you have a lot of budget limitations, or you don't have the right capacity to tackle some of the stuff. And this is the best way, I think, to start breaking it down to small and small wins to slowly tackle the biggest issues. In some cases, I think, and maybe we should talk about that as well. You've mentioned developers. Some of the secrets are so deep in the code that just to replace them would take a year of work. And then you're in a whole different situation where you need to take it back to management, and someone needs to make a decision. How are we going to do that? And on what expense? In the end, security, it's resource. It's a resource consumption. And if we do that, we are not going to, release a new feature. So we need to think about that.
Brit, you're working for a quite medium-sized startup now. And as Shahar mentioned, everyone, not just startups, are always lacking in resources. What is the approach that you would take on day one in order to counter these things? And also, what are the roles that you think that will be incorporated in this operation?
So first of all, great answers. I agree with what both said. I think that a first good step after understanding your attack surface and risks would be to understand also what solution you already have implemented, and maybe what portion of the problem they might solve. We need to remember that besides the budgeting, like implementing new tool, there is the resource that requires to implement it correctly, and it's not always available in like small, even medium companies. So you need to take it under consideration. That's.
Yeah. Jackson, I know that you guys are going to be out with an offering for startups as well. Your platform is quite comprehensive. I just asked Brit about what roles are incorporated in this whole operation, because as Ofer told us, and as we're all familiar with, there's so many different attack paths that are now related to non-human identities. So based on your work, and you've been working with quite big organizations, what are the roles that you see that are incorporated in such a program, and what are the roles and the responsibilities that each one has?
Yeah, right. So it's an unfair question to ask me, but obviously there's two options, right? One is if you have an NHI tool, and another is if you don't. Obviously, if you want to start an NHI program or a bucket or a sub program inside your access management strategy, right? You have two major aspects, and it depends on the size of the organization, this, subsidiaries that you might have, right, amount of environments. But generally, you would have your enterprise information security manager, right, that would look at different enterprise environments, understand what third-party services are being used and by whom, and what kind of access do they have. This is a very manually, obviously, effort-intensive work to do on a continuous basis to understand, who's using what. On the other side, you'll also need like an engineer maybe a developer, someone with a more technical background, right, to look at the production environments, understand what secrets are there, do we have vaults implemented, and just implementing them is not enough. What's the process? Are the developers following the process, right? Otherwise, it'll be a year just to take the secret out, so let's try to put the right guardrails in the first place. So that's obviously another head count to add, right, into implementing an NHI program. And I said that this is an unfair question, because large organizations using an NHI platform such as Astrix today actually have an intern, right? We really have one large customer, he has one intern using the platform, decreasing the attack surface on a daily basis super easily. So that's obviously the big gain, right? Having the right tools for the job to secure these kind of things.
I see. So he will be collaborating with different DevSec personnel, AppSec personnel in the organization, also people probably doing SecOps, etc., in order to get whatever is surfaced on the platform to other places in the organization that are required, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good aspect too. Any security field today, this again is not just NHI, is very much a workforce effort, right? It's not just us, security and IT people, we don't have to go and run after everyone. We talked about training, we talked about education, but tools that actually engage with end users and enable the end users to be more informed, help them remediate, right? Instead of having the security teams need to remediate manually themselves, is part, I think, of any modern security platform.
Yeah, I think what Jackson said is super important, because we see this division can be so broad inside a mature organization. There can be different people that are incorporated in the program that have different responsibilities, or whether on specific attack vectors, on specific objects in the organizations that we need to protect. And Tzach, where do you actually see that organizations are most lacking? Whether it's maintaining a life cycle, as Shahar mentioned, for managing these, or maintaining the visibility or understanding their current posture. What is the main issue that organizations currently have?
I think, and we also as practitioners are lacking in understanding the risks associated with the non-human identities. And that is the first phase, to understand. And I think the CISO event for me was an eye-opener. In a way, we have a customer that uses CISO. And suddenly we get the message that we have to rotate every key. And scrambling and chasing around, trying to understand how we do that, and what could fail in our production, our customers' production, of course. And so we did it over a weekend, and it wasn't easy. And then we put in place the plan for an automated rotation for the next time, because there will be a next time, maybe not in CISO, maybe for another product, maybe for another SaaS tool we use, and we use many tools, of course. And I think, like many other fields in cybersecurity, until you actually see it with your own eyes, the awareness is not really there. So it starts with understanding the risks, mapping where you have those identities. And for example, as I said, there's the intersection between the human identities and the non-human identities. And I had an incident with another customer where there's a data lake with a lot of information of all their customers. And suddenly, customer success came to me. They wanted to use a BI tool to get an information to see how a customer uses the application. So we create an access key to the data lake for the BI tool. And that's secured, of course. And then suddenly, the results look good. They put it into a presentation. They show it to the customer. The next thing I find out is that they give a customer access to that query. And since that customer was a very nice customer, he came to me and he said, you know, your people gave me access to every customer's data. So there's a chain of information that starts with the non-human identity, the non-human entity accessing it, and then it goes all the way to the humans, and hopefully they will be benign and not be malicious. And it all gets much more complex when you talk about RAGs. When you retrieve and assist the generation of information by AI tools.
Right, and this is the differentiation that we have between entities and identities. But Shahar, you said that you want to
I just want to say something about awareness. Do you know what the most notorious non-human identities? Ex-employees, most probably. In small startups, whenever you start building your products, it takes a lot of awareness and understanding how to build it properly from security perspective. And I think that going back to the CSA document about the security essentials for startups, that's one of the key aspects there. The idea is to make sure that developers, DevOps understand how to build their products in a way that once they leave the company, they are not turning their user into a non-human user,
Right.
because nobody can remove it from the code anymore.
Right. So maybe a specific question about that, because you've had this experience again and again and again. It seems that you like to put yourself in this situation with tons of developers. I call this trend, I don't know if it's a trend or a policy now, BYOG, bring your own GitHub. And I think lots of the issues that Ofer has shown us is from bringing your own GitHub. What do you think about it? The developers are really, let's say they want to bring their own GitHub and they claim it. Even they might ask it in a job interview, whether this is the way that we're working here.
I see it as a positive thing, because developers want to show to keep their credits and their contribution to the community, and we need to respect that. We need to provide the tools and the means to do it properly. In many cases, the policy of the organization can be that anything that you contribute as part of the job can be assigned or attributed later on for your next path in your career, and I truly respect that. But there should be some kind of iron wall between private life and the company lives. There are so many cases when you mix between the two. Cases where a developer starts, I'm not talking about specific organization, right? Don't mention it. But a developer starts a project, a POC, on a private GitHub because it was easier for her, and then upload it to GitHub. And only then remember when she wants to merge it, she understands that, oh man, that's not the right organization. And that's game over. So the idea is the combination, going back to awareness, because it's super important, but awareness without proper technical controls. I mean, I can trust them to some extent, but I trust them, but I want to see what they're doing. I trust them, but I want to provide some kind of guardrails so they will run within a proper boundary. Otherwise, it's not going to be enough, and there's some kind of shelf life for awareness training. People tend to forget after the session is over, and it's very difficult to be consistent about that. That's why we need proper security controls, and that's it.
Right. And awareness is important, and I think one of the biggest trends for a while now, leaving aside non-human identities, is also zero trust, right? And this kind of counters with zero trust approach. So maybe, Brit, you can also give us your angle, like about developers bringing their own GitHub, having maybe secrets then on their computers, and it actually counters completely everything with zero trust.
I think that security is always kind of a trade-off in like fast execution, and us as the enabler needs to see how we combine the two. Also give our business the option to work fast, but in a secure manner. Personally, I'm against this old bring your own device, bring your own anything. Again, because it's very hard to control and monitor. And as Shahar mentioned, you want to explain, you want to build a policy, you want to educate people on how exactly they need to operate, but you trust them only till a certain point, and you need to make sure that they are doing the right thing, because at the end of the day, you only need one mistake of one person in order to create a massive issue to your organization. So,
Alon, I'd like to discuss a little bit about the recent attacks that we have seen in the landscape. And Ofer already spoke about the snowflake incident, that it was not that complex in terms of what actually happened. What do you think in terms of the trends? I think you started off, again, once pretty early, comparatively. Now we see these attacks more and more. What customers should be worried from? What attack vectors should they really be worried of?
Yeah, so I think some of the latest attacks are actually very interesting. Obviously, we all heard about the Okta breach that happened late last year. Something that maybe we don't always kind of recognize and understand the chain of events that happened there. So it actually was a service account, a credential leaked by an employee on his own private laptop, of course, right? So this access token enabled access, of course, to the Okta environments, and the chain of events there was actually the Cloudflare breach, right? And Cloudflare actually did a great job. You can read their incident response report. They rotated thousands of keys, and that's a very hard job to do over a weekend again. And they forgot about a handful of these keys, and obviously it takes one key to the kingdom to get breached, right? So we all heard about these events happening on the news, but it's really it's not just lateral movement within the organization, right? It's lateral movement between different breaches that actually are a chain of events of NHI incidents. I think a lot of the technology trends, right? Such as the API ecosystem, the third-party, different microservices, right, that enable us to be agile, enable us to use something that someone else innovated and build on top of that, right? That's part of the ecosystem that we are enjoying, but obviously creates this interconnection between everything. And the last trend, of course, we can't be on a panel without talking about Gen AI, right? So we have these third-party services. More and more of them are obviously AI services, right? And they're helping us write our emails. They're helping us write our code. Tomorrow they'll help us make our coffee. And then we need to ask ourselves a question, right? This third-party AI service, right? Who's using it? What access does it have? When was it last used, right? Is it being abused, right? What data is it exposed to? Am I governing this or not? Do I trust this third party, right, that's using this AI engine on the back end? So these trends obviously will only increase in time and makes things more and more complex, and obviously expose us to more and more attack vectors. And I think just like Brit says, our job is actually not to block these kind of productivity tools, right, from being used. Because obviously an organization that will not use these third-party AI services will lose the competition. That's how it works, right? The idea is, how do we actually leverage this interconnectivity, right, these new services, but in a more secure manner?
Right, and I highly agree with what Alon is saying and what Brit has mentioned before. I think we also need to look at the vendors, and maybe, Tzach, I want to raise the question. I've been also a Snowflake customer in my previous organization. I've been suffering from this as well. I think that some SaaS organizations, we're doing a lot of SaaS in the CSA, are maybe lacking some standardization, right, and capabilities to provide customers with the actual insights. Have you been seeing like the same, and what do you think? Do SaaS require additional standardization to have capabilities for detection, auditing, better management, etc.?
I would say that SaaS organizations are new. We as a tech industry are used to changing, to having a new generation of technologies every 18 months, 24 months, you say it. But in the older technology stacks, many of the non-human identities are contained within an infrastructure that has no access from the outside. When you're a cloud-native organization, everything is cloud, everything is SaaS, everything can be accessed from anywhere in the world and by anybody, unless you put controls that prevent misuse, such as zero trust, conditional access, SSO, MFA, you name it. But the key here is that the orders of magnitude of the points of intersection between external parties and your own assets that you might not even know exist inside other SaaS platforms are huge, and you have to take care of them. And on top of that, the existing regulations do not address non-human identities as something you have to take care of. And us as consultants, when we come into an organization and they only say, well, if the regulation says it, you implement. If it doesn't convince us, we found ourselves in a discussion on how to convince customers that this is important. And unless we can show a specific breach, unless we show a specific access to information, it is very difficult.
I must say something about that because I think that vendors don't see it as their responsibility. They don't care, really. You can see there are so many examples of very big vendors that just don't care about the integration with third parties. You can set it, they can leave it as a user. The only way to integrate would be via the admin user, and it's very common.
Yeah, but that's big comparatively, like on Snowflake. Tzach, you mentioned that SaaS organizations are new. You can see Snowflake, they're quite veteran already. They're very dominant in the market. So how come they're not doing things in order to protect these secrets, etc.? I found that it was a matter of time.
So, a nice anecdote here. I think Snowflake are doing something, and it's interesting. What are they doing? If you go to their manual guidelines of Snowflake, they're actively saying you should monitor third-party connections to your Snowflake, and their best practice is it's like this: have a spreadsheet and manually document every service account and every integration you make to your Snowflake. That's their approach, right?
That's bullshit, yeah.
But do they provide the capabilities? I can say similarly about Salesforce, right? Yeah.
That's a capability.
And part of it, I think, is the awareness and understanding of the shared responsibility model in the cloud. And what is the responsibility of the SaaS provider and what is the responsibility of the customer? And what I'm not seeing is the regulators stepping in. This is a discussion as we have had as part of other breach incidents investigations on why regulators do not come in, why there are no laws enforcing specific protections, why there are no agencies enforcing even existing laws on organizations that have been breached and have not taken any steps to protect themselves.
100%. Shahar, you want to add maybe from your perspective about compliance? Do you feel that the compliance is lacking and that SaaS organizations that are...
Yeah, we will feel it 10 years from now. And they're lacking. I mean, we can't expect the regulator to be that fast. They're still talking about clean desk policy or whatever. It will take time until they adjust and adapt. But I think that when you follow the money and understand where the real big money is, I know that more advanced regulations and standards already tackling this specific point and talking about proper key rotation and stuff like that. So it's not like they're totally oblivious to this point.
Let's maybe speak again about the market and where it is going in terms of future development. It's obvious that you're seeing a lot. You're also a part and working in venture capital. Do you think that we'll see significant merger and acquisitions in the field, or do you think we're going to more of the existing providers, and we have quite a lot that are completing on their own these type of solutions and features that are required in order to protect from these vectors?
It's an interesting question, not like we discussed it earlier. I'm shocked that you asked it, but I think that it's a matter of narrative and trend in the end. And the more we have more examples out there to show that there is a need, the bigger the chances that we'll see more startups evolving around this domain and more M&As probably. I think it's very similar to AI security domain. AI security became a huge trend. A lot of the use cases that they provide are at the moment almost science fiction. I'm putting prompt injection aside for a moment, but manipulating LLM models, I think the only real cases that we've seen already that are those that the vendors themselves generated in order to prove the POC as part of their go-to-market. So I think it will take some time before we actually see this in the wild. And same goes to NHI. NHI, I think, is more common. We see more and more examples, so I think it makes more sense that we will see more vendors. The question is whether the big vendors will see it as a specific threat. And I think that from what I'm seeing now, I think that, first of all, they seem very traditional in their go-to-market perspective. I think even Okta and other giant players mostly focus on what they want to achieve, and that's mostly improving workflows, in extent of adding more to their portfolio. So I think there is a big chance for small players to start shine and make an impact on this market, definitely.
Amazing, thank you. Brit, maybe we can have your perspective as well on the market and where it's going.
I think, as usual, we'll see both. So we'll see startups that are solving a certain issue in this field of NHI, and we'll see vendors like the big vendors that go and solve in-house a specific issue or a bigger issue. It depends. So I guess we'll see a combination of both.
Amazing. Alon, futuristic trends. Where do you think that we're going in terms of attacks? You already shared with us a little bit about the introduction of AI and these managed entities might lead us to additional complexity. We already have complexity introduced, and now we might have more. So what do you think are the future trends in terms of the actual attack vectors that you will see attackers that are taking? We see, as Ofer mentioned now, it takes between 30 seconds to a minute to detect a secret on GitHub. So this is why it's complex to respond to. So where we're going in terms of attack vectors?
Yeah, so I think the future is super exciting. Machines will keep outnumbering humans, right? And they will outnumber us in a order of magnitudes again and again and again. And some of these machines are more interesting than other machines, right? They're machine learning machines, right? We call them AI services and stuff like that. So obviously, the machine identity world, right, where we looked like 10 years ago was more like certificates and TLS or different TCP/IP layer, right? When we look at modern machines are really services, you know, code, something as a service. And obviously, the network layer moved from the TCP/IP layer to the more application layer. We call it API, right, where these services talk with each other. I think the interesting or very challenging aspect that we're going to have is when these machines are going to interact with each other independently, right? When AI interacts with AI, and this will happen, right? Because we want our personal assistant to help us, you know, perform an action, right? And this action that this virtual personal assistant will do will be an action to interact with another service that's obviously also AI-enabled, right? So these machines are going to talk with each other on our behalf, right? Then the question is, how do we control, right? What can they do? What can't they do? It's not only a matter of data exposure, right? When you think of cybersecurity in terms of access management, you say, hey, what kind of exposure do I have to my critical data? But that's one thing, only one thing. Let's talk about operations, right? Can this personal assistant, I don't know, approve, right, a money transaction, right, or delete something, right, or corrupt, you know, operations and the production of the environment? So it's both looking at exposure in terms of data, but also looking at the operations of what these machines can, you know, independently start interacting with each other. Obviously, we're just seeing, you know, the beginning, the sparks of these kind of trends, but this is going to explode in the very near future, if you ask me.
That was the last panel for humans. Next year, only bots.
Yeah. So you're saying, based on what you said from a technical perspective, and I know we're left with 5 minutes, but maybe Shahar, you can respond in short. We see that we used to have this dependability from the perspective of how we do the detection of collecting logs that are more related to auditing, maybe the actions that we're taking. Do you think that we need more behavioral-based solutions and not something that is quite based only on the logging and what we have currently from SaaS providers?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, first of all, I think that regardless of the future trends, I think that if we stick to the basics, we still can cover a lot of the risks with the tools that we're already using. Going back to Brit's point, utilizing the tools that we are using, I think can be very efficient for most of us. But on top of that, obviously, security vendors are becoming more sophisticated in the way they offer the devices and services, a lot of them are already integrating AI capabilities as part of their built-in solutions, like referring to a recommendation on how to fix, remedy, and remediate. So I think we will see more and more of that. Adding more behavioral-based solutions, we are seeing them. There are great vendors with amazing offering that are based on behavioral and anomalies. So I think that I don't see a reason why it's not going to be more and more sophisticated down the road.
Amazing. We're left with a little bit of time. If anybody in the crowd has a question, we can definitely take one or two now. So just raise your hands, and I'll come over with a mic. So I guess everybody clear on the discussion. Maybe we can have one tip from each one of the panel. Sorry. Yes, of course.
Okay, so a couple of questions here. One is, governments are rushing now to the cloud, and the common wisdom is like, cloud vendors would give you all the security you want and will protect you. But this contradicts with what you guys said. So what is the truth, in your opinion, how governments can really understand what's going on? Because from my perspective, Nimbus, let's put everything in Nimbus, will be secure and happy ever after. So this is one question. The other one is, how do you know that it's NHI, right? You have Bill Gates' account in the Active Directory, Entra, whatever, and is it a human? Is it not? What is it, right?
Just a second. Okay, I'll start with the first question. There is a huge misconception regarding the cloud vendor's responsibility. And I would urge everybody to read, not just look at the shared responsibility model as a diagram. Read the CUECs, the requirements that each cloud provider asks the customer to perform. At the end of the day, we as customers are required to protect our data and our customers' data. And relying on the cloud provider may result in accidents, and we have seen in the last couple of months GCP deleting insurance company in Australia, the entire data, and they were offline for more than a week. And it's not because the cloud provider is right or wrong, or the customer is right or wrong. It is because of the intersection between the requirements of the customer and the requirements of the cloud provider. And here, as I said, the role of the regulator, especially in regulated industries, could be very important, because the regulator can verify when the service provider, not the cloud service provider, but us, the technology companies or the end companies, perform the requirements, which are to have a business continuity, disaster recovery. I know this is a huge task, and we have to understand it. And we have to understand where the non-human entities and the non-human identities are in that flow of information, and where we should take care of them.
Yeah, maybe just a very general answer. When you look at cloud services, right, and the responsibility model like you shared, so really we care less and less about different low-level vulnerabilities in terms of, the physical layer, right, than the infrastructure. If we look at SaaS models, right, they actually all we care about is fundamentally these configurations that 90% of them are identity-based, right? When you're using Snowflake, when you're using Salesforce, right, in the security aspect, right, what you care about is access management to this SaaS service, right? And obviously, Salesforce can be secure, and they've got one of the best security organizations in the world, right? But then the question is, if you add, and you cannot use Salesforce without adding a third-party service connected to it, right? Then the question is, what is the security controls of that third-party service, right? Because once it's connected, it's the same kind of risk, right? But in the extreme gap on the security capabilities that they have. So that's kind of the ecosystem that we're looking at. And again, it goes down to access management.
Hi everyone. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. I have a question like query, like Shahar said, one of the dangerous threat is ex-employee. So will you please mention some means or things how we can mitigate the risk from the ex-employee?
Yeah, Shahar, you maybe wanna.
Thank
Can
you.
repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
The question
I
was
said
about
what?
ex-employees and how we can tackle everything around ex-employees.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we need to treat them. I mean, the issue, if I go back to the issue itself, once an employee start putting their users in all the system integrations and acts like a non-human user and then leave the company, we are stuck with this user. What we need to do is first to treat it as a non-human user. From that point, make sure that nobody can access this user in a human capability, and try to explain it to the auditors, I think, which is the most difficult thing to do, because they won't see it as a joke. They say, how come this guy, Shahar, is still in the system? He left 20 years ago. So we need to explain the rationale behind that and make sure that we have full controls around it.
I would add to that in a controlled manner, try to disable the user, try to delete it, but do it in a controlled manner, because in many cases, people are afraid of the ex-employee accounts because they do not know where they are accessed. So do it as part of IR exercise, DR exercise.
And not on Thursdays.
And not on Thursdays. Do it when you have the entire team available to fix anything that breaks. And if you find something that is tied to that ex-employee account or that service account or whatever NHI you don't think should be used, create a plan to fix it. Not everybody can be fixed in a day. As Shahar said, sometimes it could take a year to fix something, but you have to put it on your plan.
Right. I think overall a top-down approach will be required for NHIs because we see that organizations are losing themselves, and it's important to really gather everything, all the corners that are required in order to protect these. And we'll end here. Thank you so much for the time and your answers and for participating. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
So thank you all, Oz and everybody else for this panel. We're going to have a break now until 11:15. Okay, we're good. Coffee and everything is outside. See you soon. 11:15, we are back with our next panel.